We live in a time of a pandemic, we live with COVID, and in a sense it came as a phenomenal shock to us because we thought we were invincible, I suppose. I live in the Liberties on Cork Street. Cork Street was a two-lane street, and from photographs, it had very attractive buildings, some of which survived. A road widening line was put in place for Cork Street in mid-1940s. So slowly in the 1970s, that street was destroyed, basically. But it has tremendous attractions and has tremendous character that in a sense is awaiting to be revealed. Cork Street is a very historic street in the city. In the middle of the street, you have the Cork Street Fever Hospital, the lawn area in front of it, with this beautiful clock tower, the Quaker burial ground opposite, and the James Weir Nurses' Home. So it's a fantastic ensemble.
Cork Street Fever Hospital was built between 1801 and 1804. It was designed by Samuel Johnson, and the building came about as the result of some lobbying.
There was a committee set up about 1801 of worthy Dublin businessmen, merchants. So there was Arthur Guinness, there was David Latouche, the banker, Samuel Bewley, the Quaker.
You have to remember at this time, Dublin was being ravaged by a pandemic. Cholera and typhus was rife. The Cork Street Fever Hospital becomes a central point. And it was a particular part of the city that was affected by these diseases because of poor hygiene levels and the crowding within the city. They wanted to bring the state-of-the-art architecture for health to what was a kind of disease-ridden part of Dublin City.
And it's a huge site, it's a 4-acre or 1.6 hectare site. It was an orchard. It was sold by a widow by the name of Mrs. Donnelly.
The pavilion type of architecture that Cork Street is built in was really expensive because you needed a lot of land. So they cleared the orchard and actually put the building there to create that distance between the sick and the convalescing. The Cork Street Fever Hospital is a very elegant building. When you look at it face on, it's a symmetrical building. You have the two flanking pavilions that are exactly matched and this long, thin corridor that basically connects them.
And to give it its full name, it's the Cork Street Fever Hospital and House of Recovery. They looked at best practice for fever hospitals throughout this island and in Britain. The East Pavilion, which was for people who had a fever. The clock tower is in the middle, and then on the western side is the House of Recovery.
Hospital design changes as medical theory adapts and changes. So in the 19th century, the hospital design was based around miasmic theory. Disease and illness can be spread through the air. This is how people were getting sick. So it's also why there's two separate buildings, two separate pavilions. There's the east and the west that are connected by a long corridor. The east side was where the actively sick were housed, and the west side was where those that were convalescing or recovering. So it was an early form of containment and control and being hygienic. They didn't quite know the theories that we have today, but they were bang on the money because we're kind of seeing that now with COVID. We're trying to keep distance and air and ventilation, and it's something that they were doing in the 19th century in the Cork Street Fever Hospital.
In these days of COVID and the need for proper ventilation, that was one of their key design features.
So in the wards, they started to move patients further and further away from each other in case that disease and illness would spread between them. And that's why you see a lot of windows in the Cork Street Fever Hospital. They wanted that ventilation through the building. They wanted the air to move the sickness through the building and outside. They saw the air as healing. These later buildings that are almost hermetically sealed, that you're trapped inside almost. There's no air, there's no connection to the outside. Whereas these early hospitals use nature, they use fresh air, and you were connected to your surroundings by the sheer fact that you could open the windows.
The Cork Street Fever Hospital played a critical role in the famine, the Great Famine in Ireland, and in, I think it was 1847, in a 10-month period, 14,000 patients were admitted with the dreaded famine fever. And there were so many patients that they had to use the grounds to accommodate them in tents.
Now that we're living through a global pandemic, the architecture of this building is a shining example of the simple way that we can care for ourselves, care for others through architecture.
There are so many things that could and should be done regarding the Fever Hospital and its grounds. And one of them is publicising it, communicating its history, its huge history, and also to arrange it so that people could have access into the grounds and to start experimenting with that.